Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Schubert. I am your host, and this is episode 18, where we will be talking about the new release, Brave the Dark. Today I am joined by Nate Deen, who is the writer and subject of this film, and I was really honored to be joined by him to talk about this film. This film is a really important subject, to me at least, and I think it's going to be really important to a lot of youth who see it as well. Nate had a lot of trauma that he went through, going through the foster system and having some really terrible things happen to him. And him sharing this on the podcast and through the film was really something to me because I just couldn't imagine what he actually went through. And then being able to talk about it, but also being such a positive light in the world as well. And you can really just see that talking to him over the phone. And this is really about the special relationship he had with his teacher, who ended up being his adoptive father and the man he took his last name from. I think this film was something that I didn't expect to really connect with on such a personal level, but I did. And I think a lot of people who maybe had rough childhoods, most likely not as rough as Nate did, but who might have had some troubles in high school or different things going on in their life, will really connect with this film as I did. So without much further ado, here's my conversation with Nate Deen. And now I'm really happy to welcome Nate Deen to the show. He's the writer, producer, and subject of the new release, Brave the Dark, which has recently been released in theaters by Angel Studios. Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I watched the movie last weekend, and I started it later Sunday night. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll watch the first half and finish it the next day. And I stayed up really late watching it because it was just a really meaningful story, and one that took me by surprise. I'd done a little reading into the story beforehand, but I guess for people who haven't heard about the movie or haven't seen it, could you maybe tell people a little bit about what it's about? Because it's your story, really.
Yeah. Brave the Dark is my story. It mostly happens in my senior year in high school, and it's a film about hope, resilience, and small acts of kindness go such a long way. It's such a cool little film. It's a little independent film, but it's got a big message, and we're going to deliver it. But yeah, it's about myself as a young person, as a child experiencing some very hard trauma in my life and growing up very angry and upset with the world, feeling that the world owed me something. And then, realizing that it actually doesn't owe you anything unless you go out and pursue it. And so thankfully, I ran into a teacher at my high school who saw a need in me and said, you know what, I'm not going to give up on this kid. I'm going to help him. And that's what the story's about. It's about overcoming those hard obstacles, two people from two different walks of life coming together, and what can really happen when we care for each other, the human connection.
When you're speaking about your teacher who made such a difference, that's Stan Deen.
Yes.
Whose name that you actually took a couple years ago, from what I understand, and he ended up raising you the last year of your high school, and then kind of mentoring you afterwards, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, Stan became like, I always say, I was the son that he never had, and he was the father that I so desperately needed.
And I know he passed away a couple of years back, and so sorry about that. But what was it like making this film and telling this story, but sort of seeing someone play Stan, especially someone like Jared Harris, who is just a fantastic actor and someone who I always enjoy watching. And once again, this is, I don't know. He almost reminded me a little bit of his Mad Men role, a little bit at the start, like where he was charming but a little awkward at times. But what was it like seeing that happening in front of you and now on the big screen as well?
Yeah, I mean, this has been an 11-year journey for me. I started writing the script with Stan 11 years ago, 12 years ago. And so he was very much involved early on before he passed. And I'm just honored to be able to tell his story. Because he's a hero of the story, and I'm okay with that. And, getting Jared Harris to portray Stan on the big screen was absolutely incredible. When Jared read the script, he just fell in love with the character and really wanted to do it. And it was a long journey getting to the end, but seeing him portray Stan in such an honorable way, really helping Stan's legacy moving forward. Jared's such a talented actor, and I'm so honored to work with him and Nick on this film, and so excited to see where we go from here.
And I think there must be almost a slight catharsis to it, seeing this finally up there after all these years, and letting people know, especially with your story, that you can overcome almost insurmountable odds if you have the right people around you and the right support system in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Stan did. He built a community around me. He got me involved in the arts, in theater. He really helped me make that change. But I also had to be willing to change. I had to be willing to give up drugs and the bad things and all of the hard things that I tried to use to help cope through the situations, but only made it worse. I had to push the negative friends away, friends that I had been friends with for a while. But I knew that that's the kind of changes that I needed to make in my life in order to move forward positively.
Yeah, so getting into the film a bit, the premise of my podcast is I like to interview people whose stories have been turned into true story films. So actually talking to the real people behind the movie, and not all the time, but once in a while people are actually involved in the making of the film. So that's cool to chat to you because you were there from start to finish, from what I understand. So I guess how first off, if this is even the right question, how accurate would you consider this film in terms of retelling your story? Is it Hollywoodized in any way, or is this as accurate as it can get, sort of a thing?
I would say it's as accurate as it can get. There was a lot of people that wanted to Hollywoodize, make it more Hollywood. But then when they read the script and saw what we were trying to do with the film, they understood, like, it doesn't need to be. We don't need to make anything up. Like, this actually happened. Yeah, there's moments because it's hard to tell this story in just 2 hours, like under 2 hours. Like, it's hard to tell a movie without, having to gloss over some stuff. But I really feel it's a very authentic film, a real film that I hope, people realize that we shot it where it actually happened. Like the high school where I actually went to and where Stan taught, we filmed it there, which is so rare in Hollywood. They're always like, let's shoot it in LA or London, somewhere else. But it was important for me as a filmmaker to tell the story where it happened because it gives it authenticity. It feels real, and it is real. In fact, some of the early childhood trauma stuff, we had to pull back a little bit, not quite show as much as what really happened because it's just too much for people to take in. People don't want to see a child going through what I went through. And so those are hard moments. And that's something that I tell people when they're like, should I watch this film? Absolutely. But I think in order to show how bright the light can be at the end, you have to show some of the darkness. And that's what this film does. We get into those heavy topics, but you're going to leave feeling inspired. You're going to feel leaving like you want to be a better person. Right. I feel that every time I watch it. I'm like, man, who can I help? Where can I go? I want to do more. And I hope that you felt that way and that viewers feel that way.
Yeah, 100%. It's inspiring. And going back to you talking about a little bit of the darkness, I think Tarantino talked about how there's a shot in Dunkirk that is one of his favorite in like war movies. And it's when all the bombs are exploding around him and you don't see the violence, but it's there and it's very present. And I feel like in this film, it's very similar where it's you don't see it, in all of its R-rated goriness, but it's there and it really packs a punch when it happens. And I did like in this film, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about if that was the plan from the start, but how you kind of interwove your story as a child and what kind of led to everything throughout the story. And we learned at the same time as Stan did, as Jared Harris's character did. And I was wondering if that was a choice that you made, or if that was something that came a little later on, or how did that come about?
Yeah, from the beginning, I wanted the audience to experience it at the same time that Stan did. And so I don't want to give too much away, but we give little hints throughout the film, little flashbacks, as you can say. So you're starting to understand, like, whoa, what did this kid go through? And it was important to have that right before the end so that everything just comes together all at once in such a powerful way that you can't miss it. And talking with the director, he really helped me to sculpt the script to really feel that way, and how we told the flashbacks and not giving too much away too early, because we do say that something very bad happens to my mother, but we don't tell all of the story until the end, which is what I love the most.
And the director, Damian Harris, is actually Jared Harris's brother. So it was a very,
right?
I guess, family-oriented film almost. It was made by a big family.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Harris and Jamie Harris, their younger brother, is actually in the film as well. He plays with a parole officer. And so to have all three Harris brothers in the film is really awesome. And that's kind of why, Jared came on board, because we had talked with Damien, and Damien loved the story and wanted to be the director. And so they went out to lunch one day, and I think Damien said, "Hey, what are you working on?" And Jared's like, "Well, I'm working on this." And then, Jared said, "What are you working on?" And he's like, "Well, this little film called Brave the Dark." And Jared read it, and he's like, "I got to do this, not just for my brother, but because I love the character. I love the script and the movie." And so he stuck with us through the whole thing, and was so unbelievable on set to watch. And it was really cool.
Yeah, and some of the scenes in the movie and just the story itself being set in your hometown and actually being filmed there, what would you say are some of the scenes that really stood out where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly like it is in my memory. This is almost word for word what happened, I guess, in the movie. What were some of the scenes that really stood out to you?
Yeah, there's a couple of amazing scenes. I think for me, the Christmas scene, the Christmas Day scene, was very authentic and real, and actually happened very much like it's shown in the movie. I hadn't celebrated Christmas my whole life, basically. When you move around from foster homes and whatnot, there wasn't a lot of celebrating Christmas for me until I met Stan, and he went way above and beyond. And in fact, so much so that I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know how to accept the love that he was trying to pour on to me, right? Like the gifts, and just his humor in that scene is so real. Me saying, "You are the weirdest person I ever met." I mean, that all happened because we were so different. I always like to say our early relationship was like Barbra Streisand versus Metallica. Like, we were just so different. And that's what the film's about. It's showing two people from two different walks of life coming together and literally becoming a family. And it's just a beautiful story.
Yeah, and then I guess the reverse of that is what is the scene that they might have changed in the movie? Or I know you said that they had to tone back on some of the violence for obvious reasons, but what was a scene that maybe didn't really happen but helped with the storytelling or something like that?
Yeah. Wow. That's a good one. I think so much of it is real, and sometimes the memories blur a little bit, but there's a couple of scenes that are, I think I'll give something away. So like the girlfriend in the movie is actually two different girlfriends. But in the movie, you don't have time to explain, well, you broke up with this one and then you started going with this one. And, so we just made the one girlfriend for the whole movie. And so I had to actually reach out to both girls and say, "Hey, this movie isn't all about just you or you, and we're not even going to use your name. It's kind of a mix of the two of you." So that was kind of a weird thing to kind of go through for them and for me, and thankfully, they don't have to say, "Hey, that's me" in the movie, or they can if they want to. But that's locally here, it's kind of like everyone's trying to figure out who is that girl, because that doesn't make sense because she wasn't that way. And so but overall, to make a great movie, you can't worry about those little details. It's I wanted to date this girl, she didn't date me, and I had to move on. So yeah.
For sure. I'd also like to ask a little bit about the process of finally getting this released in theaters, because I know it did the festival circuit first and it was made a few years ago now. So if you could tell us a little bit about what that process was like and finally getting this out into the public domain, because I know that was probably very important to you that people be able to watch this and be inspired.
Yeah. I've always wanted the film to be a theatrical release. I didn't want to just go straight to streaming. There's a lot of offers out there for streaming, but for me, watching a film is about the experience of being a shared experience, being in a room there with no distractions and really good visuals and really good audio. That to me is what a movie should be. Doesn't mean I don't watch films on Netflix or something, but I try not to watch a film for the first time on Netflix or something, because I feel like there's just, the dogs barking, the kids crying, there's so many distractions, your phone, and you miss things. When you're in the theater, you don't, like, you're all in. And so I really felt strongly that I wanted this film to be in the theaters. And it's not easy. An independent film going through COVID, going through the writer's strike, going through all of the things is really, really, really hard. And we met with lots of distribution companies, and they're all like, you'll probably have to wait 2 or 3 more years. And then Angel Studios came along, and we're like, let's share it with them. And so we got a meeting with Angel Studios, and they loved the film and felt like it was a strong candidate for them to release. And thankfully it went through the guild, and people were inspired by it and said, this film has light. That's kind of their motto, excludes light, And so we were just so thankful that they took on this film. And so we've been working really hard to get the word out there. We're offering teachers tickets to go see this film. A lot of people are paying it forward so that others who can't financially go or otherwise can get a free ticket. That's how much we believe, and they believe in this story. So yeah, distribution is very, very hard. And like I said, from the very beginning, this is that film the little film that could, like the little train that could. It just keeps going, and there's no stopping it. And we're just excited for it to be in theaters on January 24th.
Sure, for sure. And I know it's playing all over. It's even playing in one of my local theaters. So it's quite cool to see. Yeah, you're international.
Yeah. And there is a plan to be all across the world. I mean, it will, once it finishes its theatrical release, it'll go even further into the international release, and then, streaming and all of that. So yeah, we're excited and so honored that Angel chose us.
The thing about this film is, I think a lot of people have teachers in their lives that make a lasting impact, and it's one of the reasons why they have such an important job. But I guess, since the focus of this movie is you, but also Stan, what would you say, beyond taking you in, what were some of the lessons that Stan taught you? Because it really comes across in this movie that he becomes a real a safe person for you, which is something you didn't have beforehand. So what could you say about Stan, and what do you think that Jared Harris did the best job at delivering on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, Stan was such an incredible person in this community. He taught for 35 years, and he was a director in theater for 35 years. So he was very involved in the community and helped so many people, not to the extent that he helped me, but there's so many people writing comments about Stan when we promoting this film. They're like, man, he was my teacher in 1973. And I think he just exuded joy and love, unconditional love. And that was actually hard for Jared Harris. Jared Harris would say, man, this guy was so optimistic and so happy all the time and just so joyful. And so that was a bit of a challenge for Jared, but Jared really pulled it off. He pulled off this character that was a little quirky, but you just fall in love with. And we've had teachers say that after they watch this film, they want to go back to their classrooms inspired. They're going to look at that kid in the back row and say, okay, you got a story. You're not just a bad kid. You got a story. Like, what's your story? Let's talk and get to know the kids that might be the troublemakers. Like, there's a reason they're probably causing a problem. And Stan found mine and helped me through it.
Yeah. And I think that came really clearly through the movie. And I think for me, one of the moments where it was most clear was when you were finally able to be vulnerable. And I don't want to go deep into spoilers because I want people to be able to watch it with open eyes. But in that scene, and I guess that happened in real life, what was that like? Was it relief? Was it like how many emotions came into play in that scene? Because that was really the emotional core of the movie for me, where there was finally enough trust and love between the two of you where you could share this incredibly vulnerable moment that I couldn't even imagine. So
yeah.
I guess that's my question for you.
Yeah. I mean, when you go through trauma as a child, when you go through trauma in life in general, it's hard to share with others sometimes. We're a little prideful or just embarrassed. But I knew this guy cared for me, and I knew that he wanted a better future for me. And so in those scenes where they're heavy and hard and we're talking and yelling and all of those things, they were done for a purpose. They were done to break through those walls that I had put up, right? I put up all these walls around me, and he was able to break them down, but in a way that was uplifting and positive. It was never hard, never harsh, always positive, always encouraging, never judging. And so it made it easier to share it with him. And it did feel like a big, huge relief, right? Like, wow, I finally don't have to deal with those things. Now, that was actually the beginning of dealing with those things, but that was the first part of dealing with them, not allowing the past to affect a brighter future moving forward.
Yeah, and especially it feels as though it's a weight lifted off your shoulders in the film, but then also off the audience's shoulders because it's just
Yes.
looming all throughout the film, as we mentioned before, with the flashbacks and things like that. And now there's more of an understanding where before you might be like, why is this kid punching the window? And I get
Right.
that. I was a troubled kid too, and I caused lots of problems in school, but there's always something behind it.
Yep.
But like you said, it's very much about moving towards the future and dealing with the past, but not letting it affect the future in a way, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the hardest thing for me, is that every time something bad happened, I'd go, oh, it's because I'm cursed. It's my past. It's all those things.
All bad luck.
Yeah, bad luck. I have bad luck. And yes, bad things can happen to you, but it's how you deal with them that can take you to the next level. In the movie, Stan always said to me, "This too shall pass," which basically means that no matter what you're going through, it will come to an end, but it's how you deal with it. You can turn it into a positive, or it can just continue as a negative. And slowly but surely, as the film goes on, you start seeing that I'm going to make a change. There's that huge setback. But in the end, I said, Stan, you've done enough. I have to take responsibility now. And that's when real change happens, when you take that personal responsibility and say, I messed up. I'm going to do better. I accept the consequences. I'm going to get through it. And thankfully, Stan was there to help see me through it. But it wasn't until I decided that, okay, Stan, you've done enough. It's my turn to take responsibility.
Yeah. And you mentioned Jared Harris had a hard time with how optimistic he was, but he was also quite funny. And that's something that came through in the film. You mentioned this too shall pass. And there were a few times when he wanted to say it, but Nicholas interjected, or Nicholas as you interjected and said,
Right.
you don't need to say it. So how
Yeah.
important was it to, this is about braving the dark. That's the title of the movie, right? So it's a very dark film, but how important was it to make sure that positivity from him came through at the end, but also a little bit of comedy as well?
Yeah. You can't ask your audience to sit through 2 hours of hard, heavy darkness. You just can't. And thankfully, Stan was that funny guy. He was joking. He made people laugh. He laughed. So incorporating that into the film helps you get through it, revealing the darkness stuff, but then also going, hey, there's some light coming. That foreshadowing he would bring quite often. Not wearing the right tie to court. Like I had never worn a tie before. He showed me how to wear a tie. And don't you have another tie? No, I don't. This is what I got to wear. Just that little humor here and there. Man, everybody, right? Like he knew everybody. And so incorporating humor into a dark film helps the audience kind of breathe. And his humor helped me breathe in real life at times. But I always said he was the weirdest person I ever knew, but he was also the best person I ever knew.
Very good. I like that. I like to, at the end of every episode, I like to ask my guests some movie recommendations. But before I ask you, I was hoping if you remember any of Stan's favorite films, if you would be able to recommend any of those, because I know you are both artists and both, in theater and everything.
Yeah. So Stan loved movies. He and I went to movies all the time. We saw so many movies together. That was our passion. And that's why I wanted to do this as a movie, because he loved it. He loved those heartwarming, hard movies too. Saving Private Ryan was one of his favorites. It was mine as well. He was crying, the second you see the old man walking up to the grave and you see like the camera goes through his eye, and you see that it's going back to a past. He was bawling already in that movie. And I kind of laughed at him at the time. I was just like, really, Stan?
Already.
He loved to cry. He loved stories that moved him. And the same with me, Life is Beautiful is one of my favorite movies, because there is this desperate situation, and how much more desperate can it be than in a concentration camp? And this father finds a way to almost make it a game for his son, and just the beauty of all of it and how well it was done with some humor, right? In a very hard times. Yeah, those were, him and I liked a lot of the same movies.
And that was something you shared together. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing I love about film is it brings people together mainly. If
Yeah.
it's strangers in a dark theater or family members around a fire watching a Christmas movie or something like that, it's one of the great joys of film for sure.
Yeah, I really hope that this film not only encourages and inspires hope, but that people talk about it, right? Like, I believe that this film is so much more than just a movie. It's almost a movement talking about the hardships in life and drugs and mental health in youth today. Like, there's a lot of topics that we can have really good discussions about moving forward. And I'm excited to hear some of those.
Yeah, well, and thank you for sharing your story, not only in the film but with me today. It means a lot when I get to speak to people who lived, the film that I'm watching, and it's not easy sharing that with millions of people. So I do thank you for that, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Cool. I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you everyone for listening to this episode with Nate Deen. I want to once again thank Angel Studios and Nate for coming on the show. I think this message will hopefully resonate with quite a few people, and I know it definitely made an impact on me. Like I mentioned before, I don't really fully understand how he is such a positive person, but I think it's really a testament to him and who he is, but also to Stan Dean and the profound impact that he had on Nate's life. And I'm really glad that that shines through and that you can teach people about your life and hopefully make a lasting impact on them as well. So thanks again to Nate. Make sure to check this film out if it's in a local theater near you. I have included it in the description below, and it will be on Angel Studios streaming platform once it's done in theaters. So make sure to check them out because they have quite a platform now with lots of different movies, and they're just creating more and more good content that people should definitely look out for. And I know I'm really starting to enjoy a lot of the things they're putting out there. So definitely check them out. They're also in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Every person who listens to my podcast, I count as a friend. I am very thankful. So I'm sure most of you have gotten used to Mason doing the outro, but as he is not here for the interview today, I am very glad that I get to do that. So as always, everyone, if you're listening, please leave a comment, whether that's on social media or you can do that in Spotify now. We're on all the different podcast platforms. So if you're listening to us on one of them, please leave us a review or follow the show as well so that you'll never miss an episode. And as always, we'll see you at the movies. Take care.